I'd like to call this Council and Budget Committee meeting to order. I'd like to acknowledge that the land upon which we are located this evening is the traditional territory of the Attawandaron, Haudenosaunee, and the Anishinaabe people. Madam Clerk, the roll call.
All members of Council are present with the exception of Councillor Dubanow.
I have no announcements. There is an addendum with respect to report CBC 02-2025, the 2025 fees and charges report that has a revised Appendix 2 and an additional Appendix 3. Are there any declarations of pecuniary interest? There being none, I'm going to hand the chair over to the Chair of Corporate Services and the Budget Chair, Councillor Flagg.
Thank you, Your Worship. We will begin with presentation by Jonathan Jansen. Whenever you're set.
Prepared and written the user fees report as well. So a reminder that all our presentation and documents are on the town's eScribe site for the agendas. For those of you that want to follow along in more detail there, the report is that we're going to be looking at now is CBC 03. That's also linked through the presentation. I encourage you as we go through, the water wastewater budget in particular has a lot of different components looking at both different fixed and variable base and consumption type inputs and outputs on both the costs and for the town, and as well the way we build out with our customers. So this isn't your first budget, so thankfully some of this is a bit more familiar, but do feel free to ask those questions as we go through this tonight. And for the agenda tonight, we've laid out some of the areas we'll look at, both with the inputs and the rate setting of the budget, some risks and opportunities included with the budget, the timelines, and any presentation questions at the end. After that, we'll move to, after presentation questions, we will go through the agenda with the reports, both CBC 02 for the fees and CBC 03 for the water and wastewater budget. So just some context as we begin, and I'm thankful for Kevin Beauchamp and Cole Patton who've included some photos to see our system in action in different ways that we interact and keep our system running well. Just some overall context, we have customers actually as of now, it's more around 14,300 or so, and it is definitely weighted to more residential versus ICI, which is our industrial, commercial, institutional customers. You can see a general scope of the system there with the number of kilometers, both with water mains and sanitary sewers. Of course, there's much more than just those, but those are the largest components. Some of the governance or legislation that we fall under with the Safe Drinking Water Act. The budget itself, we do present it separately as an operating budget because it is legislated to be a separate full cost recovery budget. So that means, again, when it comes to some of the complications, that there are transfers or interfunctional adjustments between both the levy or your property tax budget and this budget, so that we're assigning the costs, and we'll look at some of those later. Overall goals of our system, we take great pride in our system, but we pride on it being a reliable, that's safe, available, and has excellent flow and pressure. All of this to support council's strategic plan and enhance the quality of life, looking after some key considerations there with eliminating or addressing basement flooding, protecting our natural environment, and then particularly with tonight, cost control as well. You as a council, of course, have the top level of responsibility control for our water and wastewater system. There's a number of resources we point to, and you would have participated in at some point in the last number of years, some training as well related to that for standard of care for all municipal councils. That's coordinated through the region. And then back to what I was mentioning with the different components that support our operations. We have those both from within our corporate and community services, with our billing, our IT department, our customer service, as well as infrastructure services with here at Town Hall, the engineering and capital group, as well as the operations, maintenance, and customer service group as well out at the Gibson Center. Some more overview there of operational commitments for our water and wastewater budget. Again, the legislative compliance components, goals of addressing and reducing infiltration. You'll hear us speak about I&I, that's infiltration and inflow into the system, which is something we're trying to minimize to, again, reduce cost. And a number of different investments we would have spoken to back on November 25th with a capital budget to be doing all that we can to minimize those extra costs, as well as reducing the non-revenue water volumes. Again, capital investments being made there, some relinings, our meter exchange program, leak detection, and so on, all to try and make sure that the water that we're treating and distributing is billed to customers. I think I've mentioned this repeatedly, for sure in this context and others as well, when we talk about some of the challenges of our system. For sure, we need to look at geography and geology. So we have new residents all the time coming to Fort Erie, and it certainly is a different system than not only others within the Niagara region, but others as well coming from different areas, whether GTA or beyond, where the number of kilometers per customer of pipe that is a very expensive infrastructure to install and to maintain. We look at that in terms of the extensive network we have geographically. In geology, we have high bedrock. We have a number of challenging factors which affect infiltration as well. Water main breaks is really the key metric that we look at for even our asset management plan for water and wastewater. We've seen that come down in recent years and stabilize around 30. We're actually, year-to-date 2024, just had that adjusted. It's 28 right now. There's some others that are pending possibly, but you can see that that's coming down from a historical average from 5 to 10 years ago of around 50 per year. So that's good news and speaks to renewal in our system and what our capital, how it's being maintained. Some of the legislative requirements, again, a number of them. Last year we introduced additional costs for treating excess soils, which is a new Ontario regulation requirement, and there's a number of other items there. The meter program has been around for many years in Fort Erie, but that does help us to make sure that we're getting accurate reads and that customers are paying, and we're actually detecting leaks as well with that. We have a program that cycles through not only all of our residential meter replacements, but also our commercial and industrial, which was the focus more so of the last couple of years. And then our whole work order system, coordinating as a town across all departments, all of the needs with outstanding meter and billing issues and other issues. So looking at the budget inputs, the overview is that when we develop customer rates, we're of course looking at needing to develop revenues through the rate setting net of expenses. So the primary expenses for this system are the regional treatment costs, our own town expenses, which is supporting the staff and operations that we looked at, and also net of some other revenues, local improvement charges, grants, and other fees that the town would charge. And then the rate setting from there, looking at what are, based on historical volumes, what our customer volumes are expected to be to determine a rate. So the total expenses for the town for 2025 is projected to be $25.8 million. You can see at the very top there, and based on the graph, the 62%, just over 62% of that is the regional treatment costs. They operate as the wholesale treater, I suppose, of all of the water and wastewater needs. Then the town's wages and benefits component, any materials and supplies, reserve transfers are a 20% component of that, and then debt costs, which continue to be low. So on the largest one, starting at the top, the 62% treatment costs. This is something that we've had a number of conversations over the last year or two with both Mr. McQueen as CAO and myself within the region to have that reviewed. It was last reviewed over 10 years ago, coordinated by the region. We're encouraged to see that the costs for that have been included in the regional budget with their water and wastewater for 2025. And the goal and the principles there is to ensure that that allocation, which allocates significant sums of money, I think it was, at one point I believe I said it was about $2 billion over the next 10 years of costs allocated to the local area municipalities. So we're just striving to review that to ensure a fair, equitable, and stable allocation of those costs that's based on drivers. So within the existing methodology that we have, the water charge is 75% variable, 75% variable and 25% fixed. And we'll talk more about these later as well. And the wastewater is 100% fixed in year one, but that does convert to a fully variable charge based on our actual volumes over 3 years, with the reconciliation every third year of what our volumes are for wastewater costs. We're fortunate to have a credit of that reconciliation. So in other words, our wastewater actual volumes for the last 3 years were lower than we were originally charged. And that's, again, a testament to some of the capital works we've been doing. But that's a credit. So money's being returned to the town of $788,000. The 2026 estimate based on year-to-date volumes is a credit as well. Likely not as large, but we are expecting a credit, thankfully. Again, you may recall from past years, we've gone through years where we've received a charge of $600,000 to $900,000. So that is certainly something that impacts our system. And then looking at the total calculations of that within the 2025 budget, it is based on the regional approved budget. It's an increase to the town's treated costs of $1.46 million, or a 6.25% increase. And that's a factor of both the volumes. There's a share that we would represent there based on water volume shares that are slightly up and wastewater volumes that are down by approximately 4%. And then just note that the regional budget, there's some information of details of when that was presented and approved by regional bylaw. And that budget increase was that 12.27% broken down, and you can see it is weighted much more heavily to the wastewater costs. And you'll see that come to bear within our own budget as well. Beyond that, we do look to them for our own forecasting as well. We forecast beyond the current year an additional 5 years, and based on their information, we're using about 9.25% for 2026 and 8.86% for the years beyond. So as you can see, 12.27% at this point is higher than, but certainly those impacts and those rates continue to be quite high for the foreseeable future. For the town's expenses, and we'll get into other revenues as well, it's an increase to the budget of $362,000, or 1.56%. We're losing some revenue this year. We have decreases in some of our revenue. We have a local improvement charge that's been around for many, many years that has now expired with the 25 budget. So that small revenue of about $24,000 is being removed. We're also expecting our grants to be lower. So the primary grant source, in terms of what traditionally was more a reliable grant source, was the regional CSO program with combined sewer overflow. Within the overall increases is increases to wages and benefits of $235,000, and part of that includes the full phase-in of the position that was approved in the 24 budget. An increase to materials and services of $84,000. Again, a focus of that largely being on doing what we can to address the system issues with non-revenue water and extraneous flows. And that does include allocations as well of what I shared earlier with customer service, finance, insurance, and asset management. Just to note that we did reorganize some of our costs this year with the asset management requirements spreading from just the core infrastructure needs in the past number of years to now being all town assets. We've brought it fully into its own cost center within the levy, and there are some mechanics of how the costs are assigned to the water and wastewater budget this year that are a bit different because of that. And then debt charges, no new debt charges for 25. Just noting there that we do have in 25 water charges expiring for the Crescent Park improvements, and the next one after that is 2031 for wastewater for the Frenchman's Creek improvements. Do highlight some of the programs we provide our customers for that are in additional need for financial assistance. The Water Emergency Relief Fund, it's hyperlinked there for those that want to see more details of the program. But that is $10,000 we budget annually for low-income families to take advantage of, and that's administered by the Salvation Army, as well as the Seniors Utility Relief Fund. We have a budget of $35,000 for that, and proposed with this budget is that we increase that credit from $125 per customer to $140 per customer for this year, reflecting the increased costs because it's been, I think, since 2021 since we last increased that credit. And then lastly, the extraneous flow program, $40,000 for customer subsidies, where they're undertaking works to reduce inflow and infiltration with private residences. So the rate stabilization reserves play an even greater role of importance in the water budget than our levy budget. It's important. We rely on extensively for both, but stabilization, again, we do have our largest cost being external to council decisions here with the region. And also our share, proportionate to that of the other municipalities in Niagara, does see variations and change that can compound some of those impacts at times. And unknown future treated volumes. I did speak to the credit coming up, but volumes certainly do play a role with our budgets, and the RSR, the key word there, stabilization. We try to use those reserves responsibly over the long term to ensure that we've stabilized a rate that isn't seeing larger swings impacted by some of these factors. Financing and transfers, so this builds on that comment with reserves. So we have an increase in the budget for town reserve financing of $309,000 or 1.32% of the budget. And that's the two main things there. We're seeing just a slight decrease of the transfers coming into the operating from the reserve. You may recall that last year we did include an extra large amount of that. So we've included more than we had previously forecasted in reserve funding into this year's budget to help stabilize the rate and get it to a point that we'll present later. But certainly that's a slight decrease. And then the larger increase of the two there is the $287,000 increase to address, and really, as we've stated even in our budget planning, it only begins to address some of the gap that we're again studying and pointing to, and that will be refined in 2025 with the updated financial strategy for the asset management plan. This year's is a matching. We do provide in the alternatives to the report some other options to look at what an additional 1% increase in the water and wastewater rates would provide for capital contributions. But for now, you can see that amount is matched from last year. and last year it was approximately a 6.5% increase over the prior. However, it's only about 1.3 or 4% of the total increase for this year. The capital budget, of course, we did present, and that did add some additional amortization to the amount of $22,613. So when we're approving new assets, we are including funding for their long-term replacement as well. So we need to then come up with a pricing and a recovery model for all of those expenses with the revenue. So you can see it's, we do try to maximize user fees where reasonable, again, and with use penalties and interest, but it's largely covered by the wastewater billings and the water billings. And again, you can see here the wastewater billings of 58% of that total and water billings at 41%. And with the volumes, this graph we've shown for the last number of years helps to show some of the efforts, and actually it was quite worse in some of the years before 2015, but showing how in both instances, the top line coming from the top left being our budgeted volumes, trying to bring those budgeted volumes of what we're setting rates on down in line with what our actual is. So it has stabilized into the last few years where we've truly, and this has been certainly an impact on the rates increasing, where we're trying to be accurate or more predictive with what the volume of sales for water are that drive those revenues. So we're happy to see in the latter years that line, even though of course there are variations year to year, is much closer to the darker line for actual. This just comments on some of those factors, just some of the details of how we've changed it year to year. So we're increasing the assumption of what we'll bring in for water volumes that we're charging for by 0.75%, so not very much, but that was 0 for the last 2 or 3 years. And that, again, we look at 3 and 5 year averages to see where that should reasonably be. And similarly with the wastewater volumes as well. So with the rate, we do have both a base charge and a variable charge. So the base charge for 2025, the mix that we're looking at, and it attempts to keep things in approximately for our lower tier needs in about the 50% range with base and variable, but we have a combined proposed monthly rate of $75.16. For water, that's a 7.5% increase, and for wastewater, it's a 5% increase. The Niagara average has been fairly stable the last number of years at just under 50% or 45%. So we're just above that. We are the second highest in Niagara in terms of having a base component, so there would be a lot of good reasons for us to have that, not only in terms of predictability and that, but also with reflecting the nature of the costs that we incur. Here's the municipal burden comparison updated. The BMA study, the draft, was just released about 2 weeks ago. So here you can see comparing the total municipal burden. So this includes, of course, both the water and wastewater and the levy budget. The reason we say that is because we do find there is considerable variation with how those costs are transferred between the two budgets. So you can see that Fort Erie we're approximately 3% below average for the total municipal bill. We are relatively low. We're I believe, again, this year, the second lowest for the levy, but we are the second highest on water and wastewater. So again, back to some of the challenges and some of the, what we're doing, both with our operational challenges, our capital challenges, and being strategic with the amounts that we are putting towards long-term needs with our capital. Our water is relatively high. But so, happy to see us stable there again, just below average for all of those factors. And then, so the base was the one component. Now looking at volumetric, the proposed increase is to go from $4.46.5 for 24, up to $4.912 for 25, or a 10% increase. We'll show in the end how all of this shakes out for the average household when we combine both of those and we look at all of the volumes, because lots of numbers here, but we do do a detailed calculation to summarize that for the total factors here. And again, just a comparison there, both there is a lot of variation within Niagara of how these base and variable charges are used. In Niagara, you'll see an average volumetric rate of just under $4, anywhere from a minimum of $1.58. So clearly, in that case, the municipalities largely relying on base charges to a maximum of $6.612 per cubic meter as the high. So this is the one where meaningfully we get to the bottom line there with the percent increase for the average household in Fort Erie of 7.98%. So you can see all the different components with the summary for both the water and wastewater monthly charges, with both percentage changes that we've just shown and the dollar changes as well. So it is a monthly increase of $11.36. And it brings the household cost for the average user in Fort Erie using 16 cubic meters per month to just over $5 per day. So looking at the history of where this rate has been, so on the far right, that is that 7.98% proposed for 2025. You can see last year, very similar, although be it much less external pressure, high pressure from the regional treatment costs, but much less than the 12.3% this year. So that 7.98% is just a slight increase from last year. And you can see certainly the prior years there, moving back from 2019 of a 3.98% increase, and some of the role that inflation plays, but also particularly in 24 and 25, as the asset management plans are being refined and released in Ontario, and more strategy and more effort to address long-term needs. There's definitely a divergence there of those two line graphs. Some risks to note, to the extent that we have variable rates, of course, for volume, that is a risk for all of our customers. We're happy to see growth in the town in terms of bearing some of those costs and some economies of scale, and some of the larger consumers coming on as well. There's other factors, even the age of the population, the number of persons per household, of course, would change some of our assumptions. Weather is very much a factor for our water and wastewater budget, with dry summers, hot summers, traditionally driving more consumption, and cold, damp ones having the inverse effect, as well the impact on freezing temperatures on water main breaks. Reserves we've talked about, billing frequency we've talked about in recent years. There's been 2 reports in the last 10 or 12 years to address that, just in terms of the monthly is based on AWWA, or American Water Works Association, best practice. And we do find, in terms of with our customer service group and others, that it does assist with discussions and detecting leaks, and aligns with most other utilities for cash flow. And then the AMP, which we've heard many times as well. Opportunities. There's been a number of applications the town has submitted in the last couple months. Those noted there are the Housing Enabling Water, forget the S, but something fund, and the HECS is Housing Enabling Core Servicing Stream, and then as well the regional program. So we have some older applications for CSO that we're continuing to submit and try and maximize revenues there. But to the extent that we have or are successful for any of those other applications, we would be likely bringing forward, excuse me, a budget amendment. 1 second. Getting choked up thinking about getting grants coming in. We would make amendments where the grant is not reasonably assured. Opportunities certainly as we continue to spend and spend a lot of time and effort on extraneous flows. we are seeing the benefit of that reflected in the wastewater volume changes, proportionate or comparative to others. We included many bullets on page 3 of the CBC 03 report that talk in more detail about all the non-revenue efforts of the town. Treatment costs, it's hard to understate, I think, the importance we've seen of the need for this review, where the system we have now is very different than 10 years ago, and the nature and size and servicing of the region will be very different 10 years from now. So we believe that it's going to be a really important exercise for us to be partnering with to make strides to get that correct. And then as well, more efforts with refining our capital investments. So the key conclusions for the budget before you tonight: when we distributed over our estimated volumes, the town increase, including the regional budget increase of 12.27%, is 7.98%, or just under 8% for the average 40 Erie household. We're not bringing forward any supplementary requests for enhanced or additional services that we believe council should view separately this year. Capital, of course, on November 25th. Debt we've discussed, and there's nothing new to highlight or summarize there. And do note, we have a number of resources, both for council, of course, in the memo package tonight, but also publicly that we provide on our town website. We have, I counted them up, there's 20 frequently asked questions that are available through the link there that deal with various different typical questions. Always open to refining that and ensuring if there's any ones to add or reprioritize in terms of what are your top few that you deal with, for us to make sure we're doing a good job of being accountable and transparent with our customers and making that as clear as we can. We also look to hope to review and refine some of our web information in the next year ahead. Just the summary of some of the timelines. We're, of course, now, with tonight, we'll have done the 3 columns of capital, fees, and the rate, with just the final column there for the levy outstanding, with the main meeting being scheduled for January 29th. And that's it for my question. I'll turn it back to Councillor Flagg.
Thank you, Director Jansen. And I know you're not feeling all that well tonight, and I appreciate you getting through this without too much difficulty. So we'll open the floor to questions on this. Councillor Noyes.
Thank you, and thank you, Jonathan, for your presentation and your staff who help you do it. Can you go to slide 6, please? Okay, I think this is probably just a typo. I'm thinking maybe. Is this 35 in 2024, 25 in 2022, 33 in 2022?
That's correct, yeah. I mentioned with the first one that that's probably on the higher end of what we're projecting, but currently we're at 28 for 2024.
No, I'm talking about, you have 2 2022 years.
2022s.
Oh, I apologize, that is a typo.
Yeah,
Yes.
so
23.
23 and then 22.
That's right.
Okay, so I do have another question on that. When the water breaks, with the water main breaks, does that include water main breaks that are caused by contractors when they're working on a road? For instance,
Maybe direct that to Director Walsh.
Through you, Mr. Chair. No, that does not include contractor breaks.
Okay, thank you. Then if we can go to slide number 8. I'm just looking at the 20% reserve transfers, and I'm not saying I'm against this, I'm just saying, but is that the average of most municipalities, that 20% of the water? Is that percentage comparable to other municipalities?
No, I would say that's much higher. And this is where when I'm talking about comparing our rate being the second highest, certainly council has done a lot of work to get our capital reserve transfers higher. So that is the largest component of that reserve transfer. So not all of that, most of that is capital. So when we're we can say that, probably 18% of our annual expenditures are going towards the long-term capital needs of the town's infrastructure. So, and that would be, of course, much higher if you were to filter out the regional costs and just look at that as a percentage of town costs.
Okay, thank you. If we can go to slide 12. The extraneous flow reduction program, 40,000 for customer subsidy for works to reduce inflow, that's on their property, right? Not on the town property.
That's right.
Do they know? Do the residents know?
So I believe the reason it's hyperlinked, because I think we still do provide a link to the space on our town website to promote that, and to others may be able to share how else that is communicated at what points, but that is something that is available on the town's website.
And thank you for that. Just a suggestion, because we're wanting to improve our communication, since we do send out monthly billing, putting that information on the bill may be helpful. And I don't think we're giving $40,000 to each customer. It's $40,000 inclusive of.
That's right. I believe that we provide up to, it used to be up to $4,500 a year. I think it's somewhere around that still at this point.
If I may just suggest that be put on the water bill, because we do want to catch that before it happens. If we can go to slide number 18. Trying to remember what the question was. Okay, the intensification, in here, not this particular one, but in one of them you're talking about is because we have so many kilometers of road, of sewer and stuff, and because they're so widespread, our rates go up, because to maintain the long roads but with the intensification that we've had over the last few years with new builds and stuff, how has that affected that?
Yeah, my comment about economies of scale, certainly that does help and assist. We do tend to find, those coming from quite more dense, even within Niagara. I know with the financial information return and some of the statistics we would look at annually, that some of them are no longer available, but even within Niagara, St. Catharines had 4 times as many customers per kilometer. Mississauga or Toronto would have many, many more per kilometer than Fort Erie. So, there's an inherent benefit, of course, to having fewer persons per kilometer, but that does impact our cost and our ability to recover those expenses. So, economies of scale certainly help. The more customers we have with that, the length of pipe, the better.
Okay, thank you, that's all.
Other questions? No, Councillor Lewis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. Jensen, for the presentation. And I no doubt appreciate the work that staff have put into it. And there's certainly no question from my perspective on the level of service that is provided to the residents. I was scribbling down some notes because I'm locked out of my iPad, so I'm working off the web version. And of course, tonight was the night where I put most of my questions into the tablet. You spoke about the measures in place to mitigate financial burden for low income, and I was wondering if you could just put that slide up again, because I have a couple of questions. I can't remember the number.
There we go.
Yep, there it was. So you mentioned that one of the programs had an increase this year, or proposed increase, and that was the Water Emergency Relief Fund?
No, it's the second one, the seniors utility.
Okay, perfect. And the question that I had on that is, how many roughly residents are taking part in that program? Do you know, like a ballpark?
If someone grabs out a calculator, I know we have paid out grants of just over 31,000 this year. So divided by 125, and that would be approximately how many have successfully applied for that credit.
And if you could answer that on the fly, I would have been really, really impressed. Okay, so that's good to know. And then that program is solely the municipalities, or is that municipality plus region?
That's just the town, yes.
Okay, and the Water Emergency Relief Fund, that is the same as well? That's a municipal?
Yes, the municipality funds that. It's administered externally, but we are the sole funder of that program.
Okay, thank you. And are there any regional programs for low income or?
Not for directly dealing with the billed amounts, just like I mentioned with some of the capital programs.
Okay, and thank you for that. The other question that I had was on page 19, we spoke about Fort Erie's water budget rate increase or rates compared to other municipalities. Does this slide show based on 2024 budget numbers, not what we're projecting other municipalities are currently looking at? I don't know if I worded that.
Right, so the 2024 BMA study is based on the 2023 FIRs, so the information as at December 31st, 2023. So we do track in our department what other approvals are for even 2024, and now as we're rolling into 2025, some of those increases to have a general sense of what some of those trends are. But this is the last formally compiled and vetted report that we referenced.
Perfect, and that's what I thought. So currently, do we have any idea of where Fort Erie compares based on what we know from the other municipalities that are currently going through the same budget process? Like, where are we in terms of showing our numbers and I'll say the good news?
Right. I would have to do a little bit more work on that. I might just generally say that I suspect with water, wastewater, we're seeing others that are perhaps later to the game with some of the capital targets that they're now setting, so that we would expect theirs to come up quicker than ours. Just a general comment with that, but that's all I'll say at this point.
Okay, and I think my last question, then I'll leave it to the rest. Slide 22, if I wrote down the right one, yep, that one. It mentions the region at 8.6%, but was the region not at 12, north of 12%? I'm just getting a little bit confused with
No, I may have misspoke, but the graph highest and the furthest to the right is the reflective of the regional budget increase of the 12.27%.
Okay, because the region is coming in at 12.27%, which is 60%.
Oh, and you're right. I did forget to change that at the bottom there. Sorry. The increase of the region at the bottom should be the 12.27%.
Which would be 68% of our costs in this budget.
62.
62.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate the clarity.
Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you very much, Mr. Jansen. And again, thank you to your staff for the work that you've been doing. The report indicates that 1% is about $249,000. And you had a slide up that showed the breakdown, might have been slide 7 or 8. Slide 8. And in that slide, I'm just looking at the appendix 1 in the report and looking at actuals for 2024 to date, what was budgeted for 2024 and what's being budgeted for 2025. And wages and benefits, looks like the actual is significantly under budget in 2024. And yet the wages and benefits for 2025 are actually going up again. Any comment on that?
Yeah, so I would say the largest factor there is with the position I referenced from the supplemental last year, with the manager position turnover and for other reasons, that position is still in the process to be filled. So there would have been the savings related to that position. There may be other factors. I know we did review in more detail over time, for example, and trying to make sure that those are more in line with actuals. But there are other variations with what any given year could look like, for example, with overtime.
So I'm wondering if between now and when this would come forward for bylaw, we can get a bit more information on that. I understand that there have been some additional employees, and I'm just looking at how you would have arrived at the need to increase that portion of the budget. The second thing that I wanted to ask about is, when there's a surplus, that goes into a reserve fund, correct?
Yes, that's right.
And in this particular case, it would go into the rate stabilization fund for either water or wastewater?
That's correct.
And in terms of another graph that you had, which was up when Councillor Lewis was asking you questions, the one that shows the comparison among municipalities, I noticed, and I wonder if we get that up, I noticed that Grimsby's not on that list. Is there a reason for that?
Yes, we've excluded Grimsby most years because the way that they calculate, I think it's just their wastewater rate at this point, is a collection based on assessment through the levy. So it's not highly comparable for us. I know last year there was a discussion, I believe, with them to phase it, to change that, but they are one where it's not as comparable based on the way that the levy is used for the wastewater charges.
If I might share, in terms of these various municipalities, Councillor Noyes asked you about the transfers to capital. You commented that that's part of the asset management plan. Do we have any understanding of where the other municipalities are in terms of meeting their long-term asset management obligations?
So I know I've said this numerous times with hopes with the revised regulations and requirements in Ontario. I was hoping for more requirements, albeit it's more reporting, but within Ontario for municipalities to be reporting that very thing, to know how we compare and to ensure, I think really for the government, that those that are making that effort and those investments are assured that they're being rewarded for that and not being penalized for doing the right thing with that. I know at this point, based more on informal surveys as treasurers, I know on the levy, for example, that rate would be more like 30% of our total levy to capital. And I know there would be at least 2 or 3 municipalities in Niagara that would be 10 or less. So very different. There are a whole host of different challenges and needs, of course, with different systems, with different reliance as well on debt. You know, we have tried to use debt where we can and where it's healthy and makes sense, and it's accelerating or helping our program, but there is considerable variation with what we see there. The other, I know we've done some work as well as different asset management plans have been approved to try and mine some of that information from different asset management plans. We have had some of that earlier this year as well, just in preparation for our own asset management plan, but it's not readily available.
Okay, and if I might share, so just looking at that graph, it really doesn't tell us anything about the state of the infrastructure upon which each municipality is relying in order to deliver the water and wastewater services in their community.
That's right.
We know that a couple of years ago, Fort Erie had actually covered our infrastructure obligations.
Yes, I mean, we're hesitant, anytime we talk about that number, there's always lots of unknowns with the condition of our assets, which our operating budgets are continuing to spend a lot of money on to ensure we have a better handle on what our real needs are. For us to know the gap, we need to know what the long-term needs are. In some areas, we have better, reliable data than others. And certainly the last 3 years especially have thrown a lot of things out the window with what the longer-term needs are and what the replacement cost values are.
If I might share, and those things such as inflation, the cost of construction, the cost of materials, those affect all municipalities in Ontario.
That's right.
If not the country. And then my final question, in terms of the region and its 12.27% increase, my recollection is that a significant portion of that relates to their transfers to capital needs, which means their asset renewal program.
Correct. In the most recent memo, I believe it was shown as 7.2%. That may have changed, but it's somewhere, I believe, around 7% of the 12.3% increase.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Yes, Councillor McDermott.
Yeah, just one question. Based on the average consumption of 16 point, what is that, cubic meters?
That's right. Yep.
Okay, so I guess my question is, how many people actually average 16 meters or cubic meters?
Good question.
Because I got to be honest with you. I've got water bills right along. So I've never seen anything under 33. So,
Right. So, I mean, it is based on average households. So there's households of very different size, depending on the number of residents. There are different measures. I know AWWA uses a consumption that's slightly larger. The BMA study uses a consumption that is similar, but I think slightly larger as well. The BMA study also includes median values, so average would be more influenced by many smaller, many large households. But 16 is certainly that can be extrapolated to any number of metric cubes or meters cubed for consumption, but that tends to be where most residents would fall with their monthly bill.
okay, thank you.
Anything further? Okay, and Madam Clerk, I know that you recognize that Councillor Dubanow has come in, so when we get to votes, we can include his. One more. Yeah, all right.
Thank you. I'll be brief. And this is part of the dog eating your homework and trying to do it on the fly. The one question I meant to ask was, I know legislated were required to send out the bill for the water for everything, and we're limited on what can go on the bill by legislation. But is there anything preventing us from stuffing the envelope with an infographic that shows a picture of the breakdown of the budget and what level of government, i.e. municipal versus region, is responsible for that component? And same for online. I mean, it's an email. Could an attachment not
That's
be
right.
part of that?
No, we do have options. We do generally caution that people tend to quickly throw away their bills in terms of getting just the information they need to pay it. But certainly that's why we also focus on our website. There's a lot of key information that can be shared, can be linked, can be that's factual, that can be shared with others. We have included stuffings into our mail when mail is working in the past, but we can consider that. We do have a small section in the bill itself where we can add additional notation as well. Nothing maybe as large or as graphical as what you maybe envisioned, but we do have options.
Oh, and I appreciate that. And, whether it be, maybe that's something that communications can consider. I mean, and to your point, I don't think it needs to be wordy. I think even a cartoon that's 30 seconds long on social would probably get more attention than any, but I think it would be important for us to consider visibly showing the good news. And I say that, somewhat facetiously. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And once again, thank you, Jonathan, for that report, and please pass our appreciation on to your team. That will bring us to reports then, and I will look for a movers for 02-2025, Councillor Dubanow. That motion is now on the floor. Comments? Councillor Noyes.
Thank you. Just some clarification to help me better understand on page. Okay, I have on one page I have page 4 of 39 or page 3 of 9. So anyway, the question is in regards to road trench cut final reinstatement, the fee that's going to be increased. It talks about recommending removing the fees for 2 adjacent lots, as there is no benefit in the town contracts for this situation. I'm just wondering, I don't understand that.
Can you find that?
Yeah, I did find it at the bottom of page 2 of 9 of the report CBC 02.
Are you looking at Dr. Walsh for that?
Director, it's actually included with the planning, building, and bylaw services section, so I'm not, if you would want to
Director Dollar.
look at that.
Can you find the reference, Director? Can you find the reference that I'm talking about?
Okay, we have more information possibly, if not from them, that I can have Carly Griffin chime in on with her being available remotely. She would have coordinated some of these responses.
That seems like, no.
Cole, are you able to join her in? Okay. Just give us one moment.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Can you hear me now?
We've got you, Carly.
Okay, sorry. I don't have the fee in front of me historically, but I believe in the past there was a difference in fee if there was a double driveway, and based on the pricing that we have with contractors, there's no discount, for example, by doing two at the same time. So since our pricing with contractors isn't reflecting that, it didn't make sense to have that as an optional fee as well.
Go ahead, Councillor.
Okay,
Noyes.
and thank you for that explanation, but we're not talking about a double driveway. Well, maybe we are, if we're talking about like two townhouses that have a shared driveway. Is that what we're talking about? Because this refers.
Yeah, we've lost Carly now.
Okay, because it talks about two adjacent lots,
You ever on?
which to me would be separate pieces of property.
Yeah, I'm not as familiar with the nature of the work, but based on the discussions with the operations staff, that lower fee for that type of work just didn't make sense based on the contract pricing that we have. So the intention is to remove that fee and align the pricing more with what we're paying out to contractors for those services.
Okay, I'm still not clear on this because we're talking about two adjacent lots, but perhaps sometimes, well, that's just it. Are they, who's going to be paying for it then? Which homeowner? But anyway, hopefully we can get some clarity on that a little later. But thank you for that. I guess the next question I have is, under the Planning Act, this is on, now, I don't know about what everybody else is. I'm looking at, on one page it says page 4 of 39. My next page is 3 of 9, so I know we've got duplicates of a lot of these reports, so I'm just going by the page that I have in front of me. In regards to the Planning Act, we talked about, we're asking that next year we're going to retain Watson Associates Economics Limited to complete a study and expect a report in 2025. For user fee bylaw. I'm just wondering, are we planning on following their recommendations, or they're just going to be guidelines?
Director?
Mr. Chair, through you to the councillor, we have already undertaken the study, and we would have the results by the middle of next year. And these would not be the guidelines. They would give us the new information, what the fee should be based on staff time, etc. So we would have the new fee scheduled before the council by April of next year.
Okay, thank you for that. I'm just wondering if we're going to actually follow it or come up with our own amount, as we have before. In regards to, I've got to read my own questions here. In regards to, hang on, I'm going to move my little question here so I can read it. Okay, in regards to that the region is no longer providing some of the studies, Niagara Region will no longer have responsibilities for land use planning. And we have 5 things that we're now going to be charging for. My question is the 5 fees that we are now recommending, with what the region did before, have we added any additional fees to that list?
Director?
Mr. Chair, through you to the councillor, this is the new fee that we would be adding based on, because the region would not be undertaking those studies. These are the new fees that we are proposing to add to the fee schedule.
Yeah, thank you. I understand that, and we have 5. So in the past, the region did those five things. We're not adding an extra. In other words, the region has done all of this in the past.
That's correct,
Okay.
yes.
So my next question is, how are their proposed fees compared to what the region charged for these services?
Director, go ahead.
Mr. Chair, through you to the councillor, it's my understanding that we have based these fees based on what the region was charging, so it's comparative to what the developer was paying previously to the region, now they would be paying to the town.
Okay, thank you for that. Okay, and the next one under community services, and that's on page 5 of 9 on this page, I don't know what another page would be. We're talking about community services and regarding property information status reports. I understand this is when people ask for, when they're buying a new house or selling a house or whatever, they want an update on what their arrears may be or what their tax and water rates are be, et cetera, for the year. Now, it looks like for a full package, the fee is currently set at $60 for water and sewer, for tax certificate and a water certificate, it's $60. A partial package includes a tax certificate and regarding property standards, et cetera. I'm just going to say, but if I add all this stuff up, we're increasing the rates, and I have no problem with that. But then we're saying, but if you want a full package that includes all these documents in addition to zoning information and other information, such as fire services, it's $180 for everything. So so we're increasing the other fees, but we're not increasing the total package fee.
Yeah, actually, I'll let Ms. Griffin speak to this one.
So these fees are set according to the time that staff would take to prepare these documents. So based on the amount of work and effort involved, it was deemed appropriate to increase those fees. The secondary effort is in comparing to other local municipalities. So bringing these fees up to cover costs was in line with what other municipalities were charging. So it's possible that that played into the decision not to increase the third fee, but it's based on information from staff based on the costs that are incurred with providing those services, and it was felt that the $180 was sufficient.
And thank you for that explanation. I'm not debating that. I'm just wondering the math there, that if I'm going to pay $80, an increase of $80, which is fine, and then I'm going to pay a package fee of $100 to better reflect the cost, and I get that. But if I want the whole package, I'm paying $180 anyway. So that fee hasn't changed. So the $180 is what we're currently charging for the whole package, right? If I'm reading this correctly?
So there are 3 different fees. The first fee is the basic fee for just tax and water. And then with the other fees beyond that, there's more to the package. So it's not just that 1 + 2 = 3. The third package has more documentation within it.
Oh, okay, I think I'm losing you on my question here. I'm just wondering that we're currently charging $180 for the full package, and we're not changing that amount. Is that what I'm reading?
Right.
Okay, so, but if we break up this package, we're going to be charging more for individual parts of that package.
I'm not sure I'm following. Like the first package is 60 just for the tax and water. That's moving up to the 80. And then the next, the level of package is equal to 100. Adding in the further documents brings us to 180. I'm not sure if there's a way that could be clarified further.
Okay, I guess my question is, we're increasing the $80. We're increasing the fee for the water and the town, whatever, the 2 certificates. And then we're increasing $100 for a partial package, but we're not changing the $180 that we're currently charging. So why are we not increasing the $180 if we have to increase the other two because they're costing us more? Why are we not?
Yeah, I guess the additional services are still, to prepare the additional documents for the third fee type must be in line with what the cost has providing previously. It might be that there's more time involved that is a higher cost for the other types of packages. I'm not as familiar with the services, but based on staff recommendation, that 180 still covers the cost and it's in line with what other municipalities are charging.
Okay, I'm not going to belabor this any further. In regards to going further down that page, when we're looking at assisting with fire safety plan development, and we're increasing that, I have no problem with the increase. Is that all, will that pertain to short-term rentals? Like we're increasing it from 115.42 to, no,
I am not sure, sorry, off the top of my head. I'm not sure if there's anyone else that would be more familiar with the nature of that, if it applies to short-term rentals. You might need to get back on that one.
Okay, I'd appreciate that. I just know that with the short-term rental, they need a fire safety plan. So I'm just wondering if they're going to be paying that additional fee.
That's reasonable. I think they'll get back to you on that one.
Okay, the next question I have, if I can continue, is in regards to the Crystal Beach boat ramp. I'm wondering if there is a limit to the number of season passes for the boat ramp?
Thank you.
And do we charge any difference to if you're a resident and if you're a non-resident? I know we do that for our beach passes and stuff like that. So is there any difference between residents and non-residents? And if there's not, have we considered charging non-residents a higher fee
Director?
for the passes?
Mr. Chair, I'm sorry, I don't have the fee schedule in front of me. It would say in there whether there's a non-resident fee. There would be a separate line.
Basically, it doesn't, it just says
Okay, so
125
it's
for.
one rate. Yes, we have had discussions on that.
Okay. Because I think that would be a good idea. Now, in regards to the, if I can continue, sports field fees, I see nowhere in this report anything about tennis courts, like the tennis club. Do we charge them anything? Is there a lease arrangement in place yet?
Director Walsh?
Mr. Chair, we don't have the final agreement in place, but it wouldn't appear in this regardless, under the current structure, as I understand it.
Councillor?
Yeah, if I just see if I have any, I think that's the end of my questions on this report. Thank you.
Okay, good. We will move on. Anyone else? Other questions? Okay, seeing none, I will call the question. All those in favor? Opposition? That's passed. And that will bring us to CBC 03-2025, now on the floor, looking for seconder. I'm sorry? Oh, okay, need a mover though, right? Yeah, okay. So, Councillor Christensen, thank you. Any questions on that?
I'm trying to find my questions. There's so many different
Okay,
things.
we'll see if anyone else has any. Councillor Noyes, find
Well,
them?
yeah, I can't find, there's so many addendums to this. I can't find my, just hang on one second.
This is,
It's different from what I had earlier. So now I got to go back to the original.
when does this come up for vote? 19th or 16th?
I'm looking for the water and, we're now on the water and wastewater, right?
That's where we are.
Okay.
Yep.
Yep, found it. My one question is about the amortization, and I'm just trying to find where that would be, yes. On page, I guess, 4 of 6, and I'm just wanting some more clarification on that. basically it says, the Ontario regulation says we must report to council an estimate of the charge in the accumulated surplus excluding capital assets. I understand that. So this year, you're recommending that we don't, about maybe explain the amortization, what we're changing this year that we've done last year.
Yeah, certainly. There's no change this year. This is an old 2009 Ontario regulation requirement where they were requiring municipalities to be giving towards their long-term capital needs in excess of amortization, which is not a great indication of what your future costs are. But the town for several years now has bypassed that with the $5 million annual contribution that we spoke to. So it's an annual housekeeping matter to say that that requirement does not apply to the town.
Okay, thank you for that. Do we know, well, we should know now because we had the asset management plan done not that long ago. That would better reflect what we're going to need our cost to replace our existing assets, right?
Yeah, that's information that was in the July asset management plan report to council, IS 05, I believe it was. And the more information, not just on the spending requirements, but on the funding requirements of the financial strategy will be coming forward to council in 2025.
Okay. Thank you, that's all.
Other questions? Councillor McDermott.
Are most of the rising costs with regards to the water, I mean, 12% at the region, 12.27, is this because of the fact that they're way, way behind on their infrastructure projects or pumping stations coming on board?
Yeah, that's been a matter of recent reports and even media discussion to the extent to which there's a great need within the region for theirs. And as the mayor pointed to earlier, over 7% of that increase is purely for their capital needs.
Councillor?
Just one more. I'm really having trouble with this average consumption thing because I'm pretty certain that that can't be the average. And if it's not the average, there's a problem because we're talking about reaching into the pockets of, the residents to about 1845 based on that average consumption that we're given here is 16. I just have trouble with that because I don't know how we come to that. Can you tell me what the methodology to coming to the 16, to tell us that this is the average consumption?
I would have to go back and check how, though we've used that historically for many years, not too different than how we look at an average or median household for the assessment for levy. But I think maybe more helpful is the reliance on the BMA report. I did just look it up, and they report for all reporting municipalities in Ontario annual consumption of 200, which divided by 12 is 16 and 2/3 per month. So in terms of looking even beyond Fort Erie, we would have some of our own variations on what's driving that. We could look at the number of persons per household compared to provincial averages and so on. Could very well be that we're less based on demographics and other factors like that, but the BMA would probably be the best indication that 16 is about the right number for providing at least a general comparison. We could give that number for 20, for 30, or any other kind of consumption and do a year-over-year comparative if that would be helpful.
Okay, thank you.
Your worship?
Yeah, so that's a number that you can easily calculate. We know how much water we're using in the town. We know how many customers we have, except for the lost water, which has to be paid for in any event by us through the users.
That's right.
So in terms of the where we are, excuse me, the region is budgeting over 7% per year from now until who knows when in order to try to deal with the shortcomings in its infrastructure. We're reliant upon their infrastructure, the treatment plants and the pumping stations in particular. We also have issues with respect to our infrastructure, but we're in a much better position than most municipalities. But if you think about it this way, the reason there's such a significant infrastructure gap at the region is because for years and years and years, the money that was necessary to maintain the long-term infrastructure obligations was not being collected. Wasn't being collected from people our age. And if we don't start to collect that money now and start to seriously address the infrastructure needs, it'll be the people that are younger than us, our children, our grandchildren, who are going to be picking that up. So in some respects, we didn't pay before, now we're paying. So pay me now, pay me later. We're now being caught up. And that's the predicament that we're in. And nobody likes these numbers. As the chair of the budget committee at the region, I don't like the numbers. I don't like any of the numbers. But that's, in some respects, what has happened as a result of the history. So we're stuck with that. In terms of the average use, we can get those numbers. And I agree with Councillor McDermott. If that's the number that we're putting out there, we should at least be able to provide it with some reliance so that people that are looking at it will say, hey, that isn't what I've got. I mean, it is similar to mine. Unless I'm watering my lawn frequently or I'm putting water into my pool, it's around 15, 16, 18, what have you. So I don't have anything further to say. It's just that I don't like the numbers, but those are the numbers. And, you know, we're trying to create budgets that are providing sustainability for our operations on the one hand, on the other hand, trying to be affordable for the people that are paying these bills, that is, the ratepayers. And that's a huge challenge, and I know many ratepayers won't agree that we're getting the balance right, but we have to make sure that our infrastructure is going to serve the residents today and the residents of the future and the businesses to make sure that we're competitive. It's not an easy task, but I congratulate you for the efforts that you and your staff put in, along with the other staff members who are helping with the asset management responsibilities. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Your Worship. Anything further? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? 2 opposed. Carries. And I think that brings that to a close, and I'll turn the chair back to you, Your Worship.
Thank you very much, Councillor Flagg. So we have some meetings coming up. The next committee meeting will be January the 29th, and we deal with the Fort Erie Public Library budget, assessment analysis, and general levy operating budget for the town, and February 5th, if necessary. So without further ado, Councillor Dubanow, would you be good enough? You missed the other night. Councillor Noyes had to be called in relief, but she did an admirable job adjourning that meeting.
Well, that's why I came tonight, Your Worship. I'd like to move that the Council and Budget Committee adjourn at 7:18 p.m. this evening.
All those in favor? That is unanimous. Thank you.